Did you know that this is the second most populous Spanish-speaking country in the world? And yet, more than half of its territory is almost uninhabited. Let's explore why so many Colombians prefer to live in the highlands and far from the coasts. With a population of 53 million, Colombia is the second most populous Spanish-speaking country on the planet, second only to Mexico. But this was not always the case. A few decades ago, both Spain and Argentina had larger populations. However, Colombians are not evenly distributed across the country, quite the opposite. Major cities are concentrated in two specific regions, while the rest of the territory has a very low population density. There is even something that seems counterintuitive. The most densely populated area coincides with the highlands, while the lowlands and one of the coastal regions have fewer people and cities, going against the trend seen in many parts of the world. In fact, if we draw a line like this, we can encompass 60% of Colombia's territory, yet fewer than 3 million people live there. That is, less than 6% of the country's total population. How can this be explained? First, we can distinguish 6 natural regions of the country based on climate, terrain, and ecosystems: the Pacific, Caribbean, Andes, Amazon, Orinoco, and the Insular region. The last one includes Colombia's islands in both the Caribbean and the Pacific, such as San Andres, Malpalo Island, and others. However, this region does not account for much in terms of population or area, so we will focus on mainland Colombia. As we can see, Colombia has coastlines on both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It is often said to be the only South American country with this feature. The Caribbean region is far more populated than the Pacific region. Similarly, the Andes region concentrates more than 70% of the country's population, even though it only accounts for 23% of the land area. To the east, we find 2 vast, flat, and sparsely populated regions, with a combined population of only about 3 million people, an average of just 4 people per square kilometer. Meanwhile, Colombia's largest urban areas have millions of inhabitants. Bogotá, Medellín, and Cali are all located in the Andes Mountains. Due to the mountain range, these cities sit at elevations of approximately 2,500, 1,500, and 1,000 meters, respectively. For Colombians, living at these altitudes offers several advantages. First of all, the climate is more moderate, not excessively hot or humid like in other regions. Bogotá, for example, lies on the Cundiboyacense Plateau and has an average annual temperature of under 14 degrees Celsius. Even in pre-Columbian times, this advantage was well known. The Muisca people, one of the most important indigenous cultures, lived near what is now Bogotá. Medellín and Cali, the next 2 most populous cities, are located in the Aburrá and Cauca valleys. These areas have abundant water resources and fertile land for agriculture, allowing populations to grow steadily. Urban centers developed into major cities with millions of inhabitants, along with many medium-sized cities. The country's infrastructure is also concentrated in this region, with roads, services, and communications more developed, as building here is not as difficult as in the eastern regions. Although they are flat and in some places suitable for agriculture or livestock, both Orinoco region and the Amazon rainforest have more challenging living conditions. In the Colombian Amazon, the situation is similar to the rest of this vast region. Dense rainforest with heavy rainfall, high temperatures, humidity, insects, and poor soil. Furthermore, building roads and infrastructure here is much more difficult. Economic activities in these areas are mainly extractive, such as rubber, timber, or mining, which do not encourage the formation of large cities, quite the opposite. At the same time, there are efforts to protect the unique ecosystem. Colombia is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, with hundreds of species across birds, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and fish. Most of this biodiversity is found in the Amazon and the nearby Orinoco region, also known as the Llanos Orientales. Like the Amazon, this region also has a low population density, mostly rural inhabitants, and only 1 city with more than 500,000 people. Villavicencio. Even during colonial times, this area had few inhabitants due to its limited appeal. It was only in the last century that population increased, mainly for agriculture and large-scale livestock farming, activities that do not require much labor. In addition, the difficulty of building roads means that transportation depends heavily on rivers and waterways, limiting the development of cities beyond river routes. Although the region has resources such as oil, industries tend to develop elsewhere, like in the Andes, so wealth generated in Orinoco is often exploited in other regions. Moreover, although the situation has improved in recent decades, the presence of guerrilla groups and paramilitaries has had a significant impact, discouraging settlement and even forcing people to leave. At this point, we can see why the Andes region is home to most Colombians and why the eastern regions lag behind. However, there is still one notable question regarding the coasts. Why is the Caribbean region more populated while the Pacific region remains sparsely inhabited? Barranquilla, Cartagena, and Santa Marta are the most populous cities in the Caribbean region, and this is not new as the area has been developing since colonial times. It served as a gateway for trade with Europe, where goods entered and exited from more developed regions such as the Andes. From Bogota, traveling to Atlantic ports was easier thanks to the Magdalena River. At that time, there was little trade with Asia, so all routes were oriented toward the Caribbean and Europe. Later on, the Caribbean region continued to develop through tourism and still generates opportunities today. As a result, the Andes and Caribbean regions have higher than average population densities and are home to 9 out of 10 Colombians within just 1/3 of the country's territory. That leaves the Pacific region. Only about 1.5 million people live there. Historically, this region received little attention because it did not face Europe. Additionally, it is trapped between the ocean and the mountain range, making connectivity difficult. Economic opportunities are limited, tourism is not as developed as in the Caribbean, and activities are mostly subsistence agriculture and fishing. As a result, poverty rates are very high. In the Choco department, they reach 67%, compared to a national average of 33%. Furthermore, this is a region of dense rainforest where construction is extremely difficult, but most importantly, rainfall is a major factor. It is one of the rainiest places on Earth. The town of López de Micay competes for the title of the wettest place on the planet, with around 16,000 millimeters of rainfall per year. So, were you aware of these geographical characteristics of Colombia? What impressed you the most?